How does the AirNet monitor come up with these classification systems of green, yellow, and red? Well, they predominantly cite this Harvard study here. So let's check it out. When you really look at it, our indoor environments play a critical role in our overall well being because we spend about 90% of our time indoors, which means that indoor air quality is going to either positively or negatively influence our health in the long term. This study took 24 volunteers that spent 6 full workdays from 9 to 5 in environmentally controlled office spaces, where they had blinding to the test conditions. In general, there are 3 test conditions: high CO2 levels above 1400 parts per million, traditionally acceptable CO2 levels at around 900 parts per million, which they denoted as green conditions, and then a green plus condition, which had enhanced ventilation from the outside to the inside, which put it at about between 500 and 600 parts per million of carbon dioxide. Amazingly, on average, cognitive scores were 61% higher in the green building and 101% higher on the green plus building days. And this was true across all 9 functional domains that they tested. So, first, let's take a little history lesson and then we'll dive into the paper. So, beginning in the 1970s, there was an increased cost of energy. To compensate for this, homes began lowering their rate of air exchange from the outside to the inside from 1 air exchange per hour to approximately a half of an air exchange per hour, where homes built since the early 2000s are designed to be even more energy efficient. Therefore, they only have about a tenth of an air exchange per hour or 2 tenths of an air exchange per hour, which means that the more modern or recent your home is, in a lot of ways, the worse the air exchange system will be. And similarly to home ventilation, commercial ventilations were also lowered in the early 1980s as a part of this energy conservation measure movement, which means that there's a higher potential for negative consequences to the indoor environmental air quality because decreased ventilation, decreased air turnover rates can lead to increased concentrations of indoor pollutants like carbon dioxide. And if you don't care about your health, this results in significant annual costs and productivity losses due to health systems attributable to the indoor environment, because people are more likely to be sick and then spread contagion around that way, or even to get sick simply from being in that environment. Additionally, compared to conventional buildings, environmental measures in green buildings showed lower concentrations of several key pollutants like particles, or that can be things like allergens like dust or released pollen, nitrogen dioxide, volatile organic compounds, and etc. However, these reductions generally did not extend to carbon dioxide or air exchange rate, where the big cognitive shift here is that carbon dioxide may be considered a direct pollutant, not just an indicator of ventilation, which is why they assess cognitive function after a full workday exposure to carbon dioxide while holding all other variables constant. So this was actually a really great study. They did a double-blinded study design. All the participants received the same exposure on each day, with exposures varying each day, meaning this is a repeated measure study. You can compare variables within each individual in the group and then compare these groups against one another. So statistically, it's very robust. And these were 24 professional grade employees that included architects, designers, programmers, engineers, creative marketing professionals, and managers in Syracuse, New York. The participants did not smoke, did not have asthma, did not have claustrophobia, and were not schizophrenic. And cognitive testing was performed at the same time each day, where the 3 test parameters that were experimentally controlled were the ventilation with outdoor air, the carbon dioxide levels, and volatile organic compound levels. The green plus conditions were 550 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the air. The green conditions were 945 parts per million in the air, while the third target was 1400 parts per million in the air, where importantly a technician monitored the carbon dioxide in real time and adjusted the emission rates accordingly to maintain constant carbon dioxide concentrations. The 9 categories they looked at were basic activity level, applied activity level, focused activity level, task orientation, crisis response, information seeking, information usage, breadth of approach, and then strategy, where you have the high levels of carbon dioxide in gray, the standard good conditions in green, which are borderline essentially, and then the very good conditions in green plus, which is this dotted grid with the green. And you can easily see that across all categories, the green and green plus are significantly better for all areas of cognitive functioning, where cognitive functioning scores were 15% lower for the modest carbon dioxide day and 50% lower on the day with carbon dioxide concentrations of approximately 1400 parts per million. where on average a 400 part per million increase in carbon dioxide was associated with a 21% decrease in a typical participant's cognitive scores across all domains, where interestingly, a 20 cubic flow meter increase in outdoor air per person was associated with an 18% increase in those scores. So, having a higher exchange rate in that ventilation that brings in that outside air to the inside, that's going to increase those cognitive scores back to where they should be. Where I just find this fascinating. See these generalized downwards trends. This is the green, the moderate, and then the high levels of CO2, where everything is decreasing or holding constant. So the only one that's really holding constant is this information seeking category. But everything that involves active cognition is showing a clear decline with increasing levels of carbon dioxide. So, carbon dioxide shouldn't just be used as a proxy for indoor air quality. It should also be considered as a pollutant, a direct pollutant that can decrease cognitive abilities, meaning that the easiest way to have a 15 to 50% increase in work performance or scholastic performance is to literally just make the air clean in a building. Essentially, you could be the most effective manager of all time if you took one simple action and did a company program to increase the building ventilation efficiency. Clean air makes for smarter employees, and not just clean air, fresh air.